Welcome to Laguna Podcast, an attempt at illustrating the lives and stories from the Texas outdoors. Today I sit down with a friend of the project and someone who shows a lot of promise for the future on both sides of the industry. This is my conversation with Nathan Outlaw. Okay, ready to rock?
Yeah.
Cool.
Do it.
So I got Mr. Outlaw in the chair today, and it's been a fun 4 days of grinding. And I'm glad that we're finally doing this because after we spoke on the first day, I figured it was a story that I really wanted to get at least had said. With that being said, if you want to give a brief introduction, and then we'll just start running with like the regular questions.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Nate Outlaw. I own a fly shop here in East Central Florida called Harry Goods Outfitters. It's been around since 1946, and we'll get into the story about how I acquired it about 3 years ago. But it's been a fun 3 years.
Okay, cool. So the first question that I always start to run off with this is your first memory in the outdoors, and then kind of like your chronological progression as an outdoorsman, almost let's say to when you were 18.
Okay. I still remember my first fishing experience very briefly. I remember it more because my parents have the picture hanging up on the fridge of me crying while my dad is holding a bass that I caught. We were at a friend's birthday party. I was probably 4 or 5. And I caught this bass and I really didn't want to touch it. And they were forcing me to touch it. And the picture is just me bawling my eyes out. And, it was kind of a blank period there where I don't really remember much. And then I started to, go fishing with my dad a lot. Just basic, cut shrimp off of a dock and catching pinfish. And then I was probably about 12 when I started thinking, what eats these pinfish? And I still remember I got absolutely wrecked under a dock by a big redfish. And then I got really invested into that, started catching a lot of those, and then kind of progressed from there.
Mm-hmm. When did you start taking up fly fishing?
Man, that had to be soon. Not that long ago,
Okay, so let's back up a little bit. From that point forward, how did you get from it to the moment where you started getting more serious about angling?
I started getting really serious about it, and honestly, probably high school is when it started getting serious. And I would go with my friend Aiden and my friend Reed, and we would just wade docks with spinning rods and skip plastics, and that was pretty much what we did exclusively, and it was a ton of fun. And then I still remember my friend Aiden, he started fly fishing and he brought out a fly rod. I said, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. It's the worst way to catch a fish. And I refused to touch it for years. And then, and I dabbled a little bit in it, with my uncle and stuff like that, just catching bluegill. But sight fishing with a fly rod in saltwater was dumb to me at the time. Mm-hmm. And I moved up to Amelia Island for work, and everyone fly fishes for redfish up there, right? It's just way more effective when you're fishing, low tide or flood tides or whatever it may be. And so 2019, I bought myself a fly rod for my birthday, and I just got fully obsessed with it really quick. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, some of those first moments with that fly rod when you're first getting into it, because I assume it's difficult. I assume it's like I can't make that cast. I know, for example, you'd mentioned to me one of the stories that we were talking about 2-3 days ago, where you had like that whole group, that yard sale worth of redfish.
Oh,
you couldn't, so like, stuff like that, the hardships of fly fishing is was my main question right now.
So my first month fly fishing, the tough part, kind of growing up, very little social media and living in a new place, you don't make a lot of, friends or mentors or whatever it may be. So I really was kind of self-taught to some extent. And I remember just flailing around, having no idea what I'm doing. And I met this guy up there. His name was Albert. He worked at the fly shop up there. Mm-hmm. And
this episode is made possible by our friends over at Gordy & Sons Outfitters, located in Houston, Texas, and employing a team of experienced outdoorsmen specializing in fly fishing, hunting, and wing shooting. Gordy & Sons is sure to prepare you for success in the outdoors. Next time you find yourself preparing for a weekend getaway or a bucket list trip, be sure to give them a visit at www.gordyandsons.com.
Me and Albert were red fishing one time, and I blew legitimately every shot. I mean, I couldn't throw 20 feet. And this is probably 2 months into me fly fishing at this point. And we were running back and we hit an oyster bar. So the boat just stops on this oyster bar.
Mm-hmm.
And we're pulling up a map to figure out what we did wrong. And tarpon start rolling next to the boat. And we only had 8 weights in the boats. I had my 8 weight as a TFO BVK with a Lamson Guru.
Mm-hmm.
And I cut off a redfish fly. I tied a piece of 60 on, and then the biggest fly that I could find in Albert's fly box. I could not throw, I mean, legitimately 15 feet at that point. And first cast, tarpon comes up and eats it. And ended up catching, it was like a 90, 100-pound fish. And some cool pictures of me. And so I just got really, really lucky early on in my fly fishing, career.
Uh-huh.
And then after that, everything was about big tarpon. That was the only thing I wanted to. Oh yeah. Yeah. I could not care less about the red fishing, the snook fishing, anything like that.
How was it trying to become proficient at least in finding them or stuff like that in regards to how long did it take you to feel confident in that?
Man, I mean, I still don't feel confident in it, when I was living up there, that's when I really started to get into it. And I fished with this guy. His name's Scott Owens. He's up in Brunswick, Georgia. Scott is an unbelievable tarpon guide. And I kind of picked his brain and said, how did you know these fish are here? And the way he was, just explaining to me about why they go in certain areas. And I just, it's all kind of like a formula, you need X, Y, and Z, and the fish are going to be there. So I started to figure that out, and I was consistently finding and catching them up there. And it was cool. There wasn't a lot of people doing it. At least I didn't know of, because I didn't have any social media. So felt like I was like a pioneer, but in reality, there's probably people doing it for years. So then I started, going to the Keys, going to the Everglades and stuff like that. And it just made the obsession so much worse, especially fishing with some of the guys down there who just know it at the highest level. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah. I guess one of the things I wanted to bring up was I feel like 2019 wasn't that long ago. When were you at Porsche? When did you leave Porsche?
Yeah. So I started with Porsche in, what would that be? 2017.
Because it'll start me from there.
Yeah.
And then I want to know the Porsche story because it's a really funny story and it makes sense. And then it explains how you end up here.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very important thing to cover.
Yeah. So 2017, I guess I'll recap just a little bit. I was in auto tech in high school and I was doing really, really well, just doing well in competitions, getting scholarships. And I ended up going to UTI in Orlando. Graduated in the top 1% there, went to Atlanta with Porsche, was there for like 6 or 7 months. I realized that I hate Atlanta, probably the worst place I've ever been. And so I applied a couple places down here, obviously Melbourne, my hometown, and Jacksonville. And at the time, Jacksonville just had a better offer and it made more sense for me to go live there. So worked at that dealership. I lived in Jacksonville, realized that I really didn't like Jacksonville. So unfortunately, my job was there. I wasn't ready to move, in my career. So I moved up to Amelia Island and was just commuting every day. It was about 100 miles a day. Jesus. Oh, it was terrible. It was horrible. That equated a little bit to me moving because I knew I liked Amelia Island, but there's no Porsche dealership up there, And so I progressed and, I really started working my way up in the Porsche world, became a gold certified tech, which is the highest level you can be, at a really young age. And the Melbourne dealership ended up calling me and they wanted to give me a job and they just weren't ready to, we didn't see eye to eye on, pay yet. Mm-hmm. And so finally they come to terms. It's about a year later and they said, you'll come down for this number. I said, yeah, sure. I said, okay, I'm sending you the contract. Oh, shit.
Oh, man.
This isn't good. So I walked right into my boss's office. I'm sorry, but I got to put in my 2 weeks. I just took a job. And we owned a house at the time up in Amelia Island. So we completely dropped everything to move down here for this job, move back home, essentially. At that point, I was married, So my wife grew up in Jacksonville, so I dragged her down here. We bought a house in Melbourne again, working at this dealership. I was shop foreman for a little bit, and then I went to the front of the house, just due to some, we were
Kerfuffle.
just understaffed, and I was miserable. It was the worst job. I mean, the pay was great. Everything was great there, but I was working 6 days a week. I mean, sun up to sundown. I had no time to do anything I wanted to do. And at this point in my life, my tarpon obsession had gotten so bad that I was bringing my boat to work.
Mm-hmm.
And any moment I could to leave work early being, 5:30, 6 o'clock, I would go sit on the water until 9 o'clock at night, just trying to catch a tarpon. And I still remember it was probably April. So it was like right as tarpon season's kind of starting. Everything at work was just an absolute cluster. And I kind of had a little meltdown, and I said, I'm over this. And I went in my boss's office and I quit. And I had nothing lined up at all. And I was in here shopping like right after in the fly shop, just trying to, kill time and cool down. And I asked the old owner, I said, have you ever thought about selling this place? Because at the time, it was not that it wasn't a successful business, but it wasn't what it could have been in all reality. And he said, well, I've kind of been thinking about it. My kids don't want it. I'm the third generation. And I said, well, I would love to figure out how to buy this thing, right? And so I went and I got a loan, and here I am. It all happened really, really quick. I have no retail experience at all, and it probably shows for any of my customers who are listening. It's been a huge learning experience. We did a big remodel to the shop. The building is from 1905, and it was in rough shape. Ended up repouring the foundation on one side of the building, completely gutting it, electric, ACs, everything. And so I had, 4 or 5 months off work during peak tarpon season, which was great. I loved it. I was on the water every single day, whether I was taking trips to the Keys, the Everglades, fishing here, I was going everywhere. And that's when if you're on the water every single day for months straight, you really start to figure some stuff out. And so I was really lucky in that regard. That's kind of how I got everything pretty dialed. And met a bunch of people. When I started traveling a bunch, I had the funds to go and book some guides and hang out with all these people that have been idols your whole life. And yeah, it was a fun 4 months. And then it was kind of back to reality.
Well, no, I was actually going to ask if, through you acquiring the shop and trying to, make it grow, if you had actually been able to fish with some like top quality anglers through that, or was it beforehand?
It was both. I fished with some guys down in the Keys before the shop. And then once I got the shop, I really started to try to, make some connections down there and fish with some more people. I fished with Jared Raskob twice, and he is hands down the absolute best guide down there, probably the best saltwater guide there is. I mean, it's just unbelievable, just awesome guy, and a blast to be on the boat with. We caught a slam by it's like 9:30 or 10 o'clock our first day ever fishing. It was unbelievable. He's just got it so dialed, and yeah, definitely a big inspiration to a bunch of people.
Mm-hmm. What about some other notable names?
I fished with Paulie before the shop, and Paulie's phenomenal. I'd love to fish with him again, seeing what he's doing in the tournaments and everything. I mean, he's just really working his way up. Who else have I fished with? One of my good friends, Hansen, and I know Hansen. We have fished together a few times. I took him fishing up here. He's taken me fishing down there. And it's always a fun time on the boat with me and Hansen. We're two completely opposite human beings. Yeah. Which makes it really fun. I'm stressing him out the whole time, and it's great. I love it.
One of the things that I think is super cool is how you have a big Sprinter van out the back. And you're able to run really cool trips with it as a result. Would you like to talk a little bit about the trips to Louisiana and stuff like that? Yeah. The trips were... If you're enjoying this episode or any others and want to support the project, I would highly encourage you to check out my new book, Laguna. 288 pages with over 300 images and illustrations, containing excerpts by Eric Glass, Chuck Nizer, Tim O'Brien, Bill Gamble, Ben Paschal, Ryan Sparrow, Michaela Elliott, Rick Hartman, Jaco Lucas, John Pilmer, Corey Bauman, Brian Robinson, and myself. Available at select stores, or you can order it directly at buylagunabook.myshopify.com.
Kind of my own little brainchild. I was going to a couple lodges before, and it was fun. And I thought, this is so expensive to go catch, whatever, no name fly lodges. One of my favorite tarpon fishing places in the world, epic permit fishing. But I thought all my customers can't afford, $5,500 a week. So I'm like, how do I come up with a trip that makes financial sense for the average guy who this might be, his trip of a lifetime, but he can afford $2,500, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of put a bunch of numbers together and thought, okay, well, if I went and just booked a bunch of local guides, like in Louisiana, for example, in Venice, Louisiana, I book 3 or 4 guides. I rent a houseboat. I cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner for everyone. And it's $2,500 for 3 days of fishing and 4 nights, I pick everyone up from the airport, drive them down. Like once you get to the airport, it's completely hands off. And it's a really cool, intimate's not the right word, but just cool experience for these customers to kind of see a different side of me, different side of the shop. And, they don't have to have the stress of, well, I want to go red fishing in Louisiana. Should I bring my boat? Who do I book? What do I do? All they have to do is just call me and, yep, you're signed up and good to go. And everyone on that trip has caught, their personal best redfish. I think every single time, every customer's caught their personal best redfish, which is so cool. It's so exciting. We've caught a couple just absolute giants out there. We fish with a couple guys, Paul Lappin, Scott McCullough, Nick Sasek. Scott and Nick are actually, kind of Indian River Lagoon locals to some extent. Scott's up in Titusville and guides Mosquito Lagoon and Louisiana. And then Nick is in Central Florida, and he still guides Panhandle. He guides Louisiana. And we fish with one other local guy in Louisiana. His name's Luke Bergeron. Luke's a younger guy just getting into the flats fishing, fly fishing side of it. His dad was a bay boat guide, and Luke has just been unbelievable. All my customers has just absolutely loved Luke. Yeah, it's been really, really cool.
Earlier, I mentioned hardships of fly fishing. I would like to rechange the question into the hardships of owning a fly shop.
Oh man, there's a lot of them.
Don't shy away from stuff you don't want to shy away from. Feel free to talk about all of it.
Yeah. There's a lot of clicks in fly fishing and spin fishing as well. And it's really hard to separate your own personal beliefs and a business, right? And I don't even know how to put it into words. I remember I was struggling to put it into words with you earlier. But, I carry brands based on what I believe their morals are, if that makes sense, I won't name any brands, but there's certain brands that, I don't think they're great people, but I don't think they're good for the industry, whether it's, people blowing up spots on YouTube or Instagram or whatever that is, whether it's, poor fish handling, there's just a bunch of different factors that go in. And I'm picky about that with the friends that I choose, the guides that I fish with, all this different stuff. I think I'm a lot pickier than most people, which has bit me in the ass a few times. It definitely has, as far as the shop is concerned. But, everyone I talk to, they're like, well, just stick to your guns. And, eventually you get the right customer base and all this stuff. So it's okay. I've definitely made some enemies, and that's all right.
I meant more. I mean, I get that. I was talking more so in terms of what it was like when you were setting up the fly shop at the very beginning and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Which I mean, that was going to be a next other question anyway. So you kind of just jumped the gun on that one.
Yeah. So I had no idea what I was doing, because in reality, my fly fishing career, quote unquote, was so small, and so I didn't know a bunch, right? So I just knew that I was really obsessed with it. So I kept the old owner on for a year, which was great, because he could walk me through just kind of the basics of, he knew all these customers, and he said, oh, this guy is, X, Y, and Z, and, So you kind of build a relationship through the old owner, Richard. And then I hired a guy to manage the shop. Because once again, I was just clueless, right? I don't know what to order. I don't know how to set up this point of sale system. I don't even own a computer at the time. I owned no computer. I had to go out and buy a computer, and I had no idea how to set it up. All this different stuff. And unfortunately, that gentleman, I don't think he did the best job, and it might not be his own fault. Maybe he was just a little over his head. But put the shop in just a really bad position for about a year. Just financially, just way, way over buying the wrong things. We lost a lot of customers due to, just some personality conflicts with him. And, some of those customers we still don't have back. So, it was best, that he moved on, which is all good. So now the shop is finally at a point now where I think we're in a really good position. The shop is doing phenomenal. I've got a couple employees here. One of them, his name's Jordan, and Jordan, I took him saltwater fishing for the first time ever, and his progression has been unbelievable, way quicker than my progression. It's very, very impressive. His casting is unbelievable. And my other young employee's name is Abram. He goes by Tarzan. And Abram is an incredible fisherman and does a bunch in the community. He's very, very active and, candlelighters and all this different stuff. And I think it's a much better fit for the shop than, my first year in business.
Interesting. Earlier, I asked you, we kind of talked about some of the best guys you've been able to be pulled around by. What about the best anglers you've had on the skiff?
Man, honestly, two of my best friends. One of them is actually a guide. He does pretty much all the shop trips. His name's Josh Hendry, and Josh is unbelievable caster. As far as being able to put the fly, it doesn't matter the wind direction, the distance, the angle, whatever. He can put the fly there every single time, and knows how to fish it too. It's unbelievable. And then one of them is another one of my close friends, Reed Neal. Reed Neal's built like Thor. He's just giant, and he can throw, 1 billion feet and just through any wind. It's unbelievable. Really, really good tarpon fisherman. He's got the bug like me. He'll go do day trips to Isla Morada. He'll drive from here 4.5 hours, fish all day, and drive back. Oh, yeah, he's out of his mind.
That's crazy.
He's out of his mind. So those two, I think, are some of the best guys I've ever fished with. Hansen is another just really, really good, he's been doing it so long and just understands the fishing aspect of it, the casting aspect of it. I took him up here, and he had one shot and he caught a fish. It was awesome. We had that was a fun trip. It was a fun trip.
You've been able to spend some time with Andy Mill, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I totally blanked on that. Yeah. I took Andy, and we got weathered out 2 days, but I got to take Andy one day. And he's still just such a stud. It's unbelievable. His casting, we talked about it a little on the boat. He's got such a slow, smooth casting style. And he's not worried about the fly hitting him, hitting the guide, whatever. He's just slow, smooth. And the way he can still fish is just, it's epic. It's unbelievable. We had a terrible day with Andy. We had 4 shots all day. It was blowing out of the north. It was cloudy. We got rained on. 4 shots all day. He hooked 4, and he leadered 3, and we grabbed 1. That's pretty epic as far as tarpon fishing is concerned, It's unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to fish with Nikki. Nikki is one that I think, if you're spending that much time around Andy, I think, Nikki's probably right there with him,
Oh, I bet. I absolutely bet. I feel like it's always cool to try to talk about what some of the best do that just kind of makes them stand out in terms of like performance.
Yeah.
Now I kind of wanted to gravitate a little bit towards pontoon fishing for tarpon.
Yeah. The pontoon. So This all started because I had a boat that 2 boats in a row that had just completely fallen apart from this one manufacturer. And I was boatless for like the longest point in my fishing career because of this, horrible. Just had an absolutely terrible experience with them. And my parents had a pontoon boat. Well, at the time I was like, well, it's tarpon season, I'm fishing. And at that point I'd kind of learned where to go, like where to anchor, where to do whatever, right? And I would take this pontoon boat out, and no one suspects anyone in a pontoon boat, fly fishing, much less fly fishing for tarpon, right? And I started catching a lot of fish out of this thing. And it was fun. I caught one, I don't remember what year it was. It was probably 2019, 2020. That was like a 130 out of the pontoon. And ended up actually meeting one of my customers because of it. His name's Dan. And I wanted to grab this thing, right? Because it was just a giant. And you can't grab him out of the pontoon. I have to break him off every time, right? Yeah. It's just way too high of a boat. So this guy is running by, and I flag him down. And I was like, hey, really weird scenario, but can I get on your boat and grab this tarpon real quick? Because he's like, what are you talking about? And right then, it jumped 10 feet behind his boat. And he had never even seen a big tarpon in the river before. Really? Yeah, it was hilarious. And we ended up becoming really good friends after that. And he's a great customer. I've had a lot of fun times in the pontoon. Yeah.
Now gravitate a little bit towards some of your favorite stories involved. Actually, question, when did you meet Bill Bishop?
I met Bill Bishop through one of my close friends, Rob. Rob is a member out at this heritage hunting lease that Bill's son put together. It's 37,000 acres of just untouched Florida. They manage it really, really well. And Rob brought me out there to just go hang out and, have some cocktails and shoot at pigs. And we went out there, and he's like, you got to meet this guy. His name's Bill. And at this point, I was, I still don't know all the fly fishing celebrities, I'm very to myself. I don't know anyone. So, okay, this sounds cool. And I go over there, and Bill is just the nicest guy on the planet. And I am a sucker for dumb, like one-liner, corny jokes, which Bill is full of, right? And we sat on his porch and just had the time of our lives. And I ended up befriending Bill. I like to think we're pretty close. And he has this big Fleming, this 55-foot Fleming. And he was keeping it up in Daytona. And he kept asking me, he's like, I would really love to, be able to keep it behind your shop. And I went over there and harassed the dock master there, who I know pretty well, over and over and over. And finally he's like, all right, I got a slip for Bill. And now Bill keeps his boat right behind the shop. And so it's fun, once a week we'll go over there and drink some wine and, tell the same stories over and over. And man, I wish I could have met Bill, 20 years ago. Yeah. It's just... He's one of the best people on this planet, I think.
Have you spent time fishing with Bill for tarpon?
We went one time. We just went baby tarpon fishing. And, of course, he pulls out his old Homosassa loop-to-loop leader setups with these 80-pound bite and clunky flies. And I don't care. He's having fun. Right? Yeah. But I haven't done the big tarpon thing with him. I'm sure I will. He was going to go to the Everglades this year, and the plans just kind of fell through. So next year when he goes to the Glades, he uses that boat as a mothership, right? So I'll drag my skiff over there, and we'll go have some fun. That would just be the time of my life. But Bill doesn't let beer on the boat, so I don't know how well that's going to work with me,
Just get used to one.
Yeah, right? Let's bring a big Yeti full of wine or something.
Now gravitate towards some of your favorite tarpon stories.
Man. That big one I caught, the first big one I caught with Albert was just hysterical. And I still remember, you have no idea how to pull on a fish, with your first tarpon, much less a couple months into fly fishing, right? You're clueless. And so I remember I started pulling hard because I was actually like pretty over it, Yeah. It was like 40 minutes in, and I still remember there was this horsefly buzzing around. It was slicked out. It was, 100 degrees. And this horsefly keep biting me. I'm hot. I am miserable. So at this point, I'm like, I don't care if it breaks off. We got the leader. I'm happy with it. And man, the pictures from that moment are so cool. You know, I have the coolest picture. It was during a flood tide, believe it or not. And so I'm sitting in a flood tide flat holding this tarpon, and it was epic. As far as some other tarpon stories, man, I don't have a lot of, you know, super, super crazy, memorable stories other than the Poontoon. I don't know. I like to think I've done it, you know, a decent bit and caught a good number of fish. And, you know, I tell everyone, you know, I'd rather one fish in some location that I'm just now learning than 10 fish in some location that I've been to a bunch, right? You know, so that's another reason I take so many trips, you know. I bet you I spend, between the Keys and Everglades, I bet you I spend 60 days a year there.
Really?
Most of the time by myself. I go normally 2 days at a time. I drive down. I stay at Rod and Gun Club. Well, now people are going to look for my van and slash my tires probably. So I don't stay at Rod and Gun Club. And I fish out there. And, you know, I was lucky that, you know, Josh and Reed have been fishing there for years, right? They're very familiar. And so they kind of helped me, you know, learn a couple things. And then I kind of went on from there. Once again, with, you know, you build a formula for certain areas. And you're like, okay, well, you know, if X, Y, and Z is here, I bet you that there's going to be tarpon there. And so I've started finding a lot of like my own stuff there that I'm sure it gets fished every day by guides who know what they're doing, right? But for me, I've never seen boats in there, so it's super cool.
Yeah,
I'm like, man, I figured this out, you know? Same with the Keys, you know? I don't have as much of my own stuff in the Keys, and, you know, I normally get yelled at if I'm sitting in the wrong spot or whatever, but I don't know, you don't know it's the wrong spot until
you know
someone
it's the
tells
wrong
you what
spot.
the right spot is, right? But I don't want people to tell me what the right spot is. You know, it happens on the ocean all the time. It happened, you know, last week when I was down there. I was sitting, you know, I'm just looking, I'm like, okay, well, I think we should go sit here, right? I think these tarpon are going to swim. They're going to do this. And I'm sitting there and this boat runs up, does a donut and leaves. And I'm not going to mention any names, but my buddy sends me a screenshot of this guide who texted me, said, bunch of idiots at, you know, this spot just smoking J's. When in reality, we're getting shots and like we fed multiple fish right there.
Really?
Man, it's the Keys culture is really tough. And I understand the frustration. You know, they're getting harassed by trout guides every year coming down who have, you know, caught one tarpon in their entire life. And then all of a sudden they're these
the bees
Instagram guides, you know, just blowing stuff up. And I get their frustration, but it's hard to have a conversation with a guy that doesn't want to have a conversation. Exactly.
Well, no, I meant more so like the story you told me about their biggest one.
I caught a really big one in the, up in, and that's where, you know, Bill Bishop used to fish and did all that stuff. And I caught that fish on 16, and it was just an absolute giant of a fish, you know, big laid up fish, and just brutal fight. It jumped one time and absolutely kicked my ass. You know, if anyone's seen me, they know I'm built like a fourth grader, you know, and I can't handle those big fish. Yeah. And I've gotten better, you know, you learn how to pull on them. And yeah, that fish was giant. I don't think I ever want to catch one like that again, but the pictures of me holding that thing are cool. You know, the thing is, it looks like I'm holding a manatee, you know, so wide in the water. It's unbelievable. I may have hooked bigger ones, but, you know, to be honest with you, that's probably the biggest one I've ever hooked on fly. Yeah. I caught a couple really big ones on spin in Jacksonville. I used to throw plugs off the beach. That used to be my favorite thing in the world. You know, 2018, that was all I wanted to do. And I caught a couple just absolute giant fish. Never taped them or anything, but definitely in that like 160-ish range, 170. Got some cool pictures of those, like still in my Porsche uniform. I'd bring my rods to work. As soon as I would get off work, I'd run to the beach. And man, I wouldn't get home until 9 o'clock. I'm covered in tarpon slime and sand. And yeah. I was single at the time, so it didn't matter. You know, I didn't have to come home and give someone a hug, right? Yeah, I didn't care. I just hosed myself off outside and went in and ate frozen chicken nuggets and called it a night.
Living the life.
living the life.
When you're not tarpon fishing, what else are you targeting? What else is your second, your runner up, something that you still have a lot of passion for?
I like bone fishing and I like permit fishing. I haven't done a lot of permit fishing to say that I'm even remotely decent at it, by no means. And same with the bone fishing. I've caught a good number at this point. No really big ones. I fish Biscayne and the Keys a lot, and I always try to do a little bit of bone fishing when I'm down there, even if I'm tarpon fishing. For a while, when it's not tarpon season, I'm in Biscayne bone fishing a lot, and I've booked one guide down there long time ago. We didn't even fly fish, so everything that I've learned down there, I'm really, I like to think that I learned it all on my own, with maybe a couple tips from buddies where I'm like, hey, I went here, everything's right, but they were like, well, you should check it on this tide instead, right? But as far as an area on where to fish, I put a ton of time in down there, and I'm still not good. I don't have that area dialed by any means. All the guys down there have it way more dialed than me, but I can go down there and consistently get shots, which is always really cool to go to these other fisheries and feel confident, right? That's one thing cool about people like Raskob, Dini, all these people who they can go to these different areas and consistently catch fish, whether it's the Marquesas, Chokoloskee, Biscayne. I think that is just some of the coolest stuff in the world. Where do you see the fly shop going in 2 to 5, 10 years? That's a good question. Our business is constantly growing. At a steady pace, slow, steady pace, but steady. We sell a lot of spin fishing equipment in here too. And our fly customer base has not grown, right? Because there's not that many people getting into it in this direct area, right? Yeah. But our spin fishing customer base is growing rapidly, not from people getting into spin fishing, but from people gravitating from one shop to another, whether it's the product that we sell or they like that we give people beer when they walk in, whatever it may be, right? So I do think, what's going to keep the shop growing is definitely, adding some stuff on the spin fishing side, and just getting more of that spin fishing customer base, which is fine. As you know, I still love to spin fish. Okay, I'll catch ladyfish all day. I don't know.
I saw it, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And eventually, there's an upstairs to this place. It's 3,200 square feet upstairs. It's vacant right now. If I do any retail space with it, it's in need of a pretty big remodel. But I would love to turn that into a hunting store, and have someone come in and manage that, because I'm, pretty clueless when it comes to hunting. But the duck hunting here and the turkey hunting here is just huge. It's an obsession for people, and there's no real good mom and pop hunting store. You have the big box stores like Bass Pro and Academy, but I do think it would be a really good business move to have a hunting section upstairs.
What about your 2, 5, 10-year plan for you as an angler?
Man, I don't really know. I would like to be fishing more than I am, right? This is the first tarpon season that I feel like I've been kind of locked down a little bit, just because, the shop is growing. We're somewhat short-staffed as far as like the growth rate and everything. I don't have anyone full-time here. I am the full-time buying guy, all the accounting side of things, all of that. That's all me, which is fine. But when it comes to tarpon season, you definitely get that FOMO, the fear of missing out. I get it bad, and it causes me to make some crazy decisions, like leave work right after work, drive down to the Keys, fish all day on a Sunday, and then drive back up. And, so I'm just, fully obsessed. And so I would like to have the ability to fish some more, a little bit of everywhere.
No, yeah, I meant more so in terms of like, competition, stuff like that.
I would love to do some tournaments, like the tarpon tournaments for sure. I've tried to get in for years at this point. And unfortunately, I don't know the right people yet, and maybe that will come. But yeah, I mean, I ask every guy that I fish with, what do you think about tarpon tournaments? They're like, oh, I don't fish the tournaments. And then they go and fish the tournaments. This is bullshit. I see their angler and they can't throw fucking 30 feet. This is such shit, And yeah, I mean, I would love to do that. I do think you need to, not to sound like a dick, but you need to be a little bit more the cool kids club to go down there and get accepted into these tournaments and not have people just give you shit the entire time, because
that's fair.
That makes it not fun. You know, if I could get into the tournament right now, who knows, maybe I would do it. But if everyone's just going to hate me, down there the entire time, I don't want to do that. I'd rather build some relationships and then try to get into the tournaments, So I've kind of taken a step back from that, but I don't know. I like to think you'd maybe see it in the future.
Who are some people that you kind of looked up to in the industry that you haven't met yet that you still would really like to?
That I haven't met? Man. I don't really know. I don't have I guess the greatest memory. I'm sure there is people out there, but I've met some people this past year who have definitely, gotten up there on my list. Like, I met Brandon Sear just a few weeks ago, actually, at that Lefty Tie Fest. Brandon was the nicest guy in the universe. He was so nice. I didn't, introduce myself as, whatever, and he didn't care who I was, talked to me, showed me all these flies. We went out to the bar after, which was a fucking cluster, but it was a fun cluster. And yeah, I haven't fished with Brandon. He's another one that I would love to. I guess I haven't met Nick LeBady. Nick LeBady, all the guides down there speak so highly of him. I think he is one that is just, at that top level. Haven't fished with Deanie. He's another one. And believe it or not, I haven't actually fished with Bo. I know Bo halfway decent because his apprentice is one of my close friends, Bryce Gabriel, and so we see Bo all the time when we drop off the boat at his house, and yeah, Bo's a funny guy. His relationship with Bryce is hysterical. Yeah, I still remember this one time. This is one of the first times I met Bo, maybe the first time ever. And Bo, don't yell at me. This is a funny story. We went permit fishing one day, and me and Bryce caught 4. Okay, I caught 1 on fly, which is a big fish, and then we caught 3 others on crabs. One of them being a really giant one, right? So we're hyped up. We're waiting in Bo's driveway to, talk to him. Yeah, like I said, this might be the first or second time I've ever met him, and Bo's like, how'd you guys do? We got 4 permit. He's like, holy shit, 4 permit? We're like, yeah, we got 1 on fly and then 3 on crabs. And Bo was like, what the fuck are you doing throwing crabs at these things? He's like, you both can throw a fly rod. You need to quit with that crab shit. And I was like, oh my God, my idol hates me. And then I learned that was just Bo. That's just Bo. The way he speaks is just very like cut and dry. And we joked about it later, and it's all good. But I still remember that moment. I was like, oh my, like my face was beet red. I was so embarrassed. I'm like, I'm going to throw away all my fucking spinning rods, And yeah, it was funny. I would love to fish with Bo one time, though. He seems fun.
You should listen to the episode I did with Kevin Shaw. I think he talks about, I forgot who. It might have been Will. It depends who was really big into permit fishing at the time. But he talks about how he ends up catching 2 permit, and him and his buddy end up throwing them in the ice chest. The guide's speechless, and they can't do anything about it. Oh
my God. That's gnarly.
It's a little better than just throwing crabs at him.
Yeah. That's funny.
Now, how do I put this? Okay, Seeing that right now, I think that a lot of the growth from the shop has come from social media. It seems like in your eyes, it's something that's very important. Overall, would you think social media is a net positive or a net negative for the industry of fishing in general?
I think people are making a lot of money off of it, but in my opinion, I think it's a very negative thing. There's a bunch of, people on YouTube and Instagram who, to get these views and, generate this revenue, they are just exposing all these spots who, 10 years ago growing up, nobody knew about any of this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden, someone comes out on YouTube and, drone footage and shorelines and all this stuff. And now all this stuff is ruined, right? You can't go in these zones without, 8 boats trying to chuck mullet at, whether it's big snook on docks, whether it's baby tarpon, on a shoreline, whatever it may be. I wish Elon would have bought Instagram and just deleted it. That would have been epic, Because, another thing, I think the online market for fly fishing, which is kind of, very similar, like people buying online, I can understand for like the very specific products that maybe some shops don't carry. But I think it negatively impacts most businesses, right? You're buying this guy's favorite tarpon fly who owns a fly shop in Ohio who has caught 3 tarpon in his life, Guy's clueless,
Yeah.
And I think if everyone shopped in their own market at their local places, every business would do better, believe it or not. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. No, I get it.
But going back to like social media, I don't know. I unfortunately have to use social media. I didn't have it before the shop. I do hate using it. I get shit for whatever I post. It doesn't matter if I post a tailing redfish or if I post a picture of a tarpon in Puerto Rico. Someone's going to get upset about something, right? Mm-hmm. So I've learned to take my Instagram a lot less seriously and just post, bullshit. Right?
Yeah.
Funny memes, and whoever follows the shop on Instagram knows that I don't take it very seriously. You may see some crazy comments on other posts from me, But yeah, I don't think social media is a good thing in this industry, personally. Mm-hmm. What's your opinion?
Me personally, I feel like there's a double-edged sword, and I feel like that's also a cop-out answer. The reason being is because I know that there's so much net positive that can happen, but within that the net positivity, I also feel like there's too many people that can just take advantage of the situation. And it's really hard to tell a pariah from an internet, from a phone screen. So it's really hard to kind of tell, okay, this person isn't what they seem. And It's really easy to just fall into like the allure of, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. I should maybe try to emulate in some sort of form or fashion that ends up, leading you down the wrong direction. It makes you kind of make wrong decisions, piss off certain people by running certain shorelines or whatever. So I think that it's really hard to kind of gauge the quality of information from people who just can say it real well. Because at the end of the day, like, a lie is a lie, but it's all about how confidently you portray it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that it's cool. Like, I'm glad that I'm able to do stuff like this, but I do know that, like, there also are people who, like, for example, we won't name any other projects, but like people who kind of badmouth other things, right? Yeah. Because of, certain biases or whatever.
Right.
So that's one of my biggest takebacks from it. One of the things I wanted to ask, if you want to talk about it, is that project that you're working on right now.
Yeah. So one of my very close friends and customers, his name's Spencer. Spencer has really just dove deep into racing. He's got, GT4 Club Sports, and he is putting together this cool project called Chasing Time. And Chasing Time, the idea behind it is, we're not going to be here forever. I don't want to be a spectator in life, Mm-hmm. Go out and do it. And so this is kind of a documentary, if you will, about his racing career. But for 3 months, Spencer lives down in Key West, and we go down there and tarpon fish. So he said, this would be awesome to include some tarpon fishing, because it's kind of my racing off season. Mm-hmm. So I think that would be a really important part, in this documentary. So I'm actually leaving tomorrow to go down there and film with them. Go get yelled at by some guys on the keys for a little bit, and it'll be cool. It'll be a really cool project. He's released the trailer to me, and the trailer is just unbelievable. He's done a phenomenal job, getting this message across, in just the 2 minutes of the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited for what this is, and I'm super grateful for that opportunity to be able to, kind of show my face in there. I think that'd be great for business, because not a lot of people know me.
For sure.
I think it'll be really, really cool.
What gets you amped up in the mornings whenever you get out to go tarpon fishing? Is it the aspirations of what can be? Is it the sunrise? Because I hear the sunrise a lot.
I don't know. Seeing that first fish roll is always pretty exciting. Or if you're fishing laid up fish, you're like, let's just say you're fishing the Everglades, right? And you're pulling around for some laid up fish, and all of a sudden you see that black stick in the water. It's exciting, but not to sound corny, but everyone, says it's the bite, but it is, the bites are the coolest, right? We had a couple cool bites.
Yeah, we had a couple really cool ones.
And, it's by far the coolest part of it. I like pulling on them, but I don't like pulling on them that much, to be honest with you. I'm not built for that. I like going to a zone saying they're going to do X, Y, and Z here. They're going to hit this bar. They're going to do this. And it happens, right?
Yeah.
And, I think you kind of got to see that this week, I love that. I don't know what it is, but I think being able to explain exactly what they're going to do is super cool. Whether they cooperate or not is one thing, but, it's a lot of these guys, whether they're guides or anglers or whatever, they just pick a shoreline and they just start pulling, right? They don't have these zones where, and that's one thing I learned from Raskup. Jared goes to a certain zone and he says, we're going to get a shot here, here, and here, and then we're going to leave, right? It might be a 5 or 10 minute pull, It's really short, and he'll just go up and every time. I mean, I still remember that, the first time we fished, we went out back and,
yeah, keep going.
We went out back and caught a ton of baby tarpon, those 5 to 20 pounders, right? Mm-hmm. And by, I don't know, 7:38, he was like, all right, well, let's go, run over here and catch a bonefish. Mm-hmm. Okay. And we run over and we're fishing this flat, and he's like, all right, you see the big dark spot over there? And said, yeah. And he's like, all right, well, those are all bonefish. I'm like, those are all bonefish? And he's like, yeah, just throw anywhere in there. And sure as shit, they were all bone. I mean, it was hundreds. It was ridiculous. And right after that, he's like, all right, well, go ahead and pick up that permit rod. We're going to catch a permit real quick, get a slam. Like, so nonchalant, right? He's like, they're going to be sitting right here. Mm-hmm. We pull over there, and sure as shit, they're sitting right there. And I catch one, and we slam. I was slam number 400 for him, which is just outrageous,
I forgot which slam I was. I was like in mid 300s.
Really?
Think so. I may be wrong. It might have been a while ago. Could have been like upper 100s, like 190 something, I think.
Man, if I was guiding down there, that's probably all I would want to do is, I didn't get the slam thing because I hate up here. I don't know why I hate it. People catch a redfish, trout, and a snook, and they're like, I caught a grand slam today.
Hey, that's Texas slam. Relax. Slow down.
Oh, my God. It drives me up a wall. And the slam changes depending on what they catch, right? A ladyfish all of a sudden will be a grand slam. Yeah, no, dude, it'll just be a grand slam. Everything's a grand slam now, But that's the true grand slam, It's actually hard to go do that, right?
Yeah.
If you want to go catch a redfish, snook, and trout here, it's
all pretty much the same spot.
Yeah, right. You can go blind cast for a little bit and catch all three,
Yeah.
But I get it, to make your anglers feel good. It's fine. It's fine. I won't complain too much.
Okay. Well, so we're at 54 minutes right now. Mm-hmm. The shop's about to open, so I feel like we should probably hurry up. Let's do the last two questions. First question being, looking back at everything that you've done, either in your career as just the sole owner of Harry Goods or just your fishing career, however you want to look at it, is there anything you wish you would have done differently? You can use the word regret if you want, but anything you wish you would have just done differently, period.
I go back and forth on this. Sometimes I say yes, and I say I regret X, Y, and Z, but I wouldn't have met the people that I met, done the things that I've done if I didn't make, whether they were mistakes or just, career choices, whatever, right? I don't know. I think, I like to think I made the right decision leaving Porsche. My wife is still at Porsche, and we were making great money and everything, but you learn really quickly, money is not everything. It really doesn't matter. I pay myself $9 an hour right now, and because that's, it's what I can afford to do and, still have employees. And, but I get to do the cool stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So as far as, anything I would do different, man, I don't know. Cause everything I've done here I made a billion mistakes here. I make mistakes every single day here, but I learn from them. So if I didn't make those mistakes, I feel like, it could have cost me,
more money in the long term.
Right. Exactly. I'm glad I made the mistakes early in my, ownership life. So I don't make them again at a bigger scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I know it makes perfect sense. And the last question I always ask is, as if you're talking to the next generation. So like think as if you're talking to some of your employees that are coming through the shop or kids who come to the shop, et cetera, whatever. What is a piece of advice you'd give them going into the industry, either retail, guiding, any other sort of avenues within the same industry?
I don't know, pick your idols and mentors wisely. I think, and this is kind of going back on the social media, I think people pick really poor mentor. We don't even have mentors here, which I think it's a whole nother topic, but we don't, people are picking these idols off people on Instagram, who, on the surface level, they're catching a lot of fish, but they're just, they're not good people. They're not good for the industry. And, I don't know. It's trying to say too much without sounding like an absolute dick. I don't know. Just, pick your idols wisely, I think it's smart to get involved with a shop. And it doesn't have to be my shop. You could get involved with whatever shop, because we see, a different side of everyone, right? We see all the stuff behind the scenes, and we, as my employees know, I'm very, very picky about how we portray ourselves, the people we associate with, and not to sound, snooty, but I think you do have to be that way in this industry. It's too easy to, fall into that trap and kind of get wrapped up with the wrong crew because you think they're part of the cool kids club, when in reality they're just they're just bad for the industry. I don't even know how to put in words what I'm trying to say, but
how would you put that? I mean, I just feel like what you're basically trying to get at is it's easy to kind of follow the wrong ideas, wrong mentality. It's easy to be led astray.
Oh, it's super easy, and it's unfortunate because I think, once again, I don't even know how to put this into words, to be completely honest with you. It's a really tough, touchy subject that I've definitely lost customers and lost business over. Because I've dropped certain brands for those exact reasons, and I've, kind of terminated relationships with certain, people because of it as well. I really try to hold strong in what I believe in as far as how the industry should be, because I've been on it. What's different than me, what's different with me is I've been on both sides of it. I've been in the industry, and then I've been on the outside looking in, and you learn really quickly it's two completely different realities.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I've met some people in the industry who couldn't care less about, me because of my, Hansen puts it the best, the social credit score.
Yeah.
Right. And, but online, and from the outside looking in, these people are gems, right? They, everyone loves them, talks about how nice they are. They probably never even met the guy, right? And then you go to meet them, and you get completely just shrugged off, right? That's bullshit.
Yeah.
You know? And so I really do my best here, and I probably don't do a good job of it, but I really do my best to try to include everyone who wants to just come talk, right?
Yeah.
Now, there are definitely some people that I may not do that with, right? Right. But I really do my best to try to include everyone, teach everyone, you know, who wants to be taught.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my piece of advice would, you know, get involved with a shop and like try to, you know, build that community around there, and, you know, try to find a mentor to some extent, right? And as I mentioned, we don't really have mentors here. I had no mentor. You know, the closest thing I had to a mentor, to be honest with you, was my friend Josh. I like the way Josh approaches everything. Josh approaches everything very lightly, you know, kind of tiptoey. And I'm the opposite, right? So I think right in the middle is a really good, you know, I'm kind of I don't know, I kind of put my foot down and
Very,
not afraid.
very flat-footed.
Yeah, I'm not afraid to kind of speak my mind, which is, you know, bit me in the ass a few times. But yeah, and, you know, Josh has taught me a bunch about snook fishing. He's by far the, you know, in the area, the best snook fisherman, best snook guide. There's no doubt. You know, the amount of big fish that he's catching, especially this year, you know, every year he's catching more and more, figuring it out with flies, you know, different strips, different fly placement, whatever it may be. And unbelievable. And you know from yesterday how tough those big snook can be.
Yeah.
You know, how many did we throw at in that 40-inch range?
I don't know, probably like 6 to 8 big fish. Yeah.
Yeah, and they just kind of
the only one that gave it any sort of look was the one where literally skipped right over its head and they went for it. That blew me away, honestly. And the rest could all go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
Oh, whatever. Well, we are at the hour and 2 minute mark. We've kind of covered a lot of stuff. Is there anything more that you wish you have had said?
No, to be honest with you, you know, it's, as I mentioned, you know, when we started talking about doing this, I said, I'm not a very important person. Like, you don't need to do a podcast with me. You know, I don't have a lot to say.
It doesn't matter. We're here. Like, we're here. We've been fishing for 4 days. I think the story behind the shop is pretty cool. I think the hardships you've had to go through are pretty cool. I think it's definitely worth mentioning. I don't think there's anything more to it than that.
Yeah. I think there's some people in the industry who've just done so much more than me, or so much more dialed, but they, you know, there's so many people. I learned about people that, you know, every week, every month, whatever, that have been so low key for so long, yet they're some of the best, right? And it's so interesting because you look at social media for you know, their social credit score, or how good they're doing, how many big fish they're posting, and all these people are, you know, just flying under the radar, and they're some of the coolest people in the game.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. All right. Well, like, with that being said, man, first of all, this has been really fun these last 4 days. I've had an absolute blast. I'm super glad that we actually made that happen. I'm glad that we're doing this. And I'm just glad that you're a part of the project.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's been fun.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we've hit everything we needed to hit, so all we got to do is get on out of here.
I love it.
Cool.